to my channel here over at SubScribe. So these are the people who are calling you literally Hitler online. They're the ones who think that they're the last thing that stands between Trump and conquering the world and forming some new world order or possibly invading Poland. And if you're wondering why this article is so bizarrely hyperbolic and why the surrounding articles feels like something feels off about it, like why are these people so stressed out about a video game? It's because these are the kind of people who are writing these articles. These people really feel the need to control every aspect of your life and, more importantly, your perception of things. So this game's got a really interesting history because it was crowdfunded, and since the first was set in 1400 Eastern Europe, it had, well, obviously European people in it, which is a problem for these anti-white racist crowd of cat ladies and soy boys, as you can see from their images. So in 2014, things were, I guess, peak wokeism to the point, and YouTube was a whole lot funner back then because there used to be YouTube channels that would showcase just these bizarro blue-haired weirdos, and then YouTube got rid of those channels, which is kind of interesting. Interesting of Google. It's like, well, that's why Google bought YouTube in the first place. And people, things were so woke to the point where it didn't matter how ridiculous it was. They would just put black lesbians in everything. So when the first game didn't have it because it's set, 600 years ago in eastern Bulgaria or something, these pussies had the virtue signal. And, when you look at this guy who wrote the article, it's like, this guy's not playing with a full deck. So the game developers was pro free speech, and that's a problem for these left-wing crowd who are quick to ostracize anyone who is not on board with the narrative. And I guess he was not believing the story of the filthy whores Zoe Quinn and Anita Sarkeesian. And obviously the media lost their minds if you weren't on board with Gamergate. Now, as it turns out, those globalist puppets were funded by the government in various forms, so they could write endless articles with not much interaction simply because USAID or USAID was subsidizing them, which is when you go to websites and you look at them and you go like, how are these people? How is the Mary Sue in business? It's not adding up. They're not getting enough clicks, and there's not many comments. There's not a lot of interaction, but they keep writing these articles. How are they getting paid for it? It's like, well, that might be because your tax dollars are paying for them to get out there and put this bizarre narrative out there. So it's nice to know that our government is even more corrupt than we had imagined. Our expectations were low, but funding butt-fucking in Botswana was where your taxes were going. So what happened is people liked the first game, and the SJWs hate anything that people like, but it seems like the second game has kind of drifted off into woke territory. And the left will say something like, oh, yeah, yikes, my guy, if black characters, then woke. Well, not necessarily, not if you're careful, but, like I always say, somebody like me, a normal person, could write a black character. SJWs can't because they're terrified. And the other thing is if you sodomize a 15-year-old child in the game, as they do, then yes, that's pretty woke, or really anything gay at all is woke. And if you didn't have gay scenes in the first game, and then suddenly you have gay scenes, gay option in the second game, most people are going to question, well, you didn't really need to do that. Not a whole lot of demand for that, and it's kind of odd that you put it in there. It feels like, I don't know, like John Greenblatt off stage left is holding a Luger to your head, or maybe, I don't know, Larry Fink with a briefcase full of money, as the meme goes. Anyway, so they showed one of the sample scenes, and one guy is laying on top of another guy, which is kind of weird. Like, because with a woman it makes sense. She's got an innie waiting for an outie. Parts match up, but I have to assume with two guys they're just crushing each other's nuts. I don't know how that works. It seems kind of gay to me. At least with The Last of Us, he does the ugly chick doggy style. Anyway, this game is set about 1400 AD, and I guess they forgot to do the math because the kid getting butt stuffed is 15 years old, and there's a word for that sort of Epstein Island behavior, but maybe they made a mistake. I guess it's possible. The bigger issue is why would you have gay anything in a video game? There's just not enough of an audience who cares for that kind of stuff. And to be fair, why even bother with straight sex scenes at all? I know that's kind of popular in games now, but I don't like why is that necessary? You can just imply it. Like they walk into a bedroom and they sit on the bed and the camera pulls out and pans away and you just see their shadows and then it changes scenes. It's like how graphic do you need to get in a game? Do people really care about sex in games? I always felt sex scenes got in the way of stories in general because they required such a shift in emotion when you're transitioning from an actor or a drama type of scene into a sex scene. And don't get me wrong, sex is great, but it's like changing gears too harshly in a story. Anyway, so gay sex in a game is pretty much the definition of woke and a fair criticism. Oh, you're just histophobic. Yeah, that's not real. It's just Frankfurt School talk. Then we've got some black character, which most people are going to say is going to be so rare 600 years ago in Eastern Europe that it's weird to include it. And obviously, they include him for woke points, and he's an obnoxious character. But it would have made more sense if he was some kind of Arab mix from North Africa. Instead, they made him a sub-Saharan, and they go, "Oh, well, the Moors." Yeah, nobody thinks the Moors were sub-Saharan Africans. That's just kind of revisioning history. So people love to argue about the Moors and the traders and the genetic makeup, but they were most likely North Saharan people. So they shoehorn a black in place of an Arab, but in their minds, black is the top of the woke food chain. The only thing that beats it is trans, but I guess that would have been a bridge too far for 1400. But then they make the character obnoxious and complaining about the food and how much better his native goat balls are, or how they're so much more educated and smarter than the Eastern Europeans. There's a name for that sort of we was kings type of character. It's called a Mary Sue. If you want to put a black character in the game, and obviously it's totally not needed because it's 1400 Eastern Europe, at least don't make him a Wakanda stereotype. But the thing is, they just can't help each other. They're addicted to lecturing the audience about how advanced the non-white characters are to the detriment of the white characters. The problem is, you just don't need to do that. That's where you just leave black characters out of it. And it's kind of a similar issue with this Sinners movie that's coming up, where it is I don't know, set like 150 years ago somewhere, and there's the blacks have a roadhouse, and they play live music, that kind of stuff. And there's vampires that come to town, but the vampires are white and they're musicians, and I guess they're gonna have a vampire. It's gonna be the evil white vampires are gonna prey on the innocent black type of stuff. It's just gonna be nonsense. And the thing is, it's probably not gonna do well. It's a $90 million movie because that level of woke ship, like obvious pandering, has sailed. But the thing is, if you want to make a vampire movie and you go, okay, we got this guy Michael Jordan and a bunch of other black actors, we want to make a black movie. Fair enough. You put just black people in it. You don't have any non-blacks in it. It's like you have the blacks who own the roadhouse and they play music and they have a bar and a restaurant or whatever, and then the vampires are also black. So the protagonists and antagonists are the same group of people. There's no racial issues whatsoever. This is just not a time when nobody's really interested in watching more of this kind of race grievance type of stuff. Nobody cares, and it's not going to be a big seller. But like that simple adjustment would have been a way for you to make movies. And you go, well, yeah, it seems obvious. Why wouldn't I know that would make more money. Why didn't they do it? It's like, well, the USAID kind of crops up where, or the Larry Fink money kind of crops up where as it turns out, so many things now are not organic because it's either BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard on the private sector, or they might even be tied into the government as well, or coming from the government, there's money flowing around to make these narrative movies that have been going on for so long. The USAID really should be a bigger story, but it's kind of like It's kind of like a Civil War level event where it kind of feels like if people really examined it, they would realize they're not going to vote their way out of this. Anyway, they don't. The thing with gamers is, as somebody pointed out, is don't feel sorry for gamers because they get what they tolerate. Like with anything else, it's like when movies come out, wait for some reviews to come out before you bother watching it. And with this game, Kingdom Come Part Two, you should have waited. People should have waited to hear about, like, okay, there's a black Moor in it, and he's super obnoxious, and there's a gay scene in it, and some other stupid stuff in it as well. It's like it's that fear of missing out of, like, I gotta pre-order something. It's like, no, slow down, let it come out, let people figure out what the hidden scenes are, and then it's like, oh, there's gay scenes in it. Do you still want to support it? No, probably not. Those are not our values. And here, of course, the viewer gave it a high score, which the professional reviewers give it a high score, which doesn't mean it because it looks like that the couple I showed you. It depends if they're going to give it high scores for the woke elements. The user reviews matter the most, and actually they're pretty good, and they're probably going to drop a little bit over time as the hidden details kind of come out. But most people don't have a problem with the storyline or the gameplay. They're just not that into butthole sex because naturally most people are just not that into that. Or the Black Mary Sue who seasons his chicken and is so much more smarter than everyone else. The whole thing is stupid, but it gets them woke points. It just feels anachronistic. It feels like 2014 SJW energy, where things are just kind of, I guess the pendulum is kind of swinging back a little bit. Then there's some stupid scene about some non-Christian temple getting attacked, and you have to defend it instead of joining the people in burning it down, which naturally would be your first choice, but I don't think you have that option. You have to defend it, which, gross. And you have to slaughter other Europeans to save foreigners who are in Europe. That doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? You would team up with the Europeans and go after everyone else. Because the game designer is, I guess, come out of the closet as woke, and maybe he was hiding it in the first game and lecturing about how evil the European Christians are, and they're trying to burn some temple or something. Like you would care about it, like your motivations just don't make sense. But to an SJW, it makes sense. But it actually brings glory to God to destroy the house of the devil. So the whole thing is kind of weird. Anyway, there's this fascinating discussion from an admitted group of pussy Soyboys who were talking about how discussions of games have shifted to YouTube, Twitch, Discord, and other social media and away from video game websites. And that's bad to them because the video format doesn't have the permanence of video. And though there was an interesting, people are talking about the technology of archiving things, realize that, things written in stone are around for tens of thousands of years, and books are around for a lot longer, and people are looking around at where information's held now, and it's held in the worst possible way to hold information in a digital format. You realize how delicate things are, where even just a physical copy of a book can last, if it's kept dry on a sunlight, can last hundreds of years. And now so much is kept digitally. It's very, very fragile. It's not a good thing. Anyway, it's harder for them to control the narrative and keep cancel culture going, which is critical to these type of people. And the thing is, I show you their image because you look at the images and he's got a screw loose. He's desperate to call things out as problematic. It's like that's how he exercises his power and authority over the world. And in doxing wrong thinkers and problematic people, and yikes my guy, and being better, being more virtuous than these other type of SJWs. Anyway, cancel culture is cringe, but they're right about the text-based format because it's really useful because you can do word searches and include hypertext to other articles. Let me see. He's been whining about this game for a long time. The thing is, that is great, but the problem is that almost all of these websites are run by these pussy soy boys, and until recently, there was no moderate or right of center, zoom in on this a little bit, representation. It was all just this obviously very far left wing stuff. Now we have a half a dozen of these kind of like bounding into comics fandom, whatever it's called. I'm drawing a blank now. It's like 1 a.m. There's a few of these kind of that Park Place type of stuff, or Smash JTs, or Bleeding Fool. There's like a half a dozen of these kind of websites, but they have a tiny footprint compared to these globalist sites. And now, as it turns out, these kind of Kotaku, IGN, Mary Sue things are probably funded by USAID by way of your tax dollars. So these websites are not organic. None of this narrative is organic. They're subsidized glow ops designed to push sodomy and anti-white hate. And they're pissed that people are switching over to Odyssey, Rumble, YouTube, and focusing on sort of community groups that are centered around channels or groups of individuals, like a Comicsgate or Fandom Menace type of group. And most of these collection of channels don't even have names, and they're not organized. It's just like if you go into the YouTube settings, it'll say people who watch this channel watch they watch the other 5 channels are Nerdrotic, Heels versus Babyface, Clownfish, Ethan Van Sciver, and Yellow Flash. So these channels are kind of grouped into these collections. There's not a name for that. It's just you can imagine these nodes with different brightness of nodes going from connection to connection, like an image of the brain or something. And that's where people are getting their information from. And it's definitely more organic, and it's harder for these political commissars to police, because you go on YouTube and then you go into Telegram and you talk about stuff and you share a meme there. And then you go on Gab or Post or Nice Crew or Twitter, and you're bouncing these things around. It's not like a website where you're writing articles and there's a comment section, but that's too tightly controlled, because half the time they don't even allow comments, or they delete your comments, or they ban you from the site if you say anything that goes against the narrative. And honestly, that hurts them in the long run, because it takes the energy out of the site, and it hurts traffic. But then if they're getting paid by the government in terms of subsidies, it's like, well, this is why this shit has been going on for so long, is because you've been paying for it. Anyway, these people are whining about the guy's comments from 2018, where apparently the developer didn't jump all over the Gamergate issue, or he had, I guess, kind of a nuanced take. And 5 years later, they're still bitching about Gamergate. That was back in 2013 when Zoe Quinn came out with the Depression Quest. And speaking of which, they also use this USAID CIA glow jobs in the Trees connection, where your tax dollars went to fund the media to write these endless articles to try to control the narrative. That whole story is absolutely crazy. But the point being that these pussies just cannot move on. And they're trying to bring back the energy of Gamergate as if, it was 10 years ago. Nobody gives a shit about it. So anyway, they're admitting that the second game is a little bit woker, because it's got gay, black, Jewish, whatever in it, and the Nazi fans from the first game aren't playing it, which doesn't make sense, because the game is selling well. Will it continue to sell well? A lot of games have a big peak in the beginning, and then it kind of fades off. Who knows? But people at least are playing it. It's not like an obvious bomb like Concord or Dustborn. Anyway, the point about decentralized communities worrying them is the most interesting point of these articles. And as there's a lot of articles, I didn't realize this game had bothered them so much. It's like, oh, it's like kind of like the Witcher thing, where it's game set in Europe. I guess Witcher would be more fantasy. This would be more based in realism. It's like, yeah, it's not going to be full of lesbian, transsexual Africans, because it's set in Hungary, 600 years ago or something. Yeah, obviously. You'd be crazy to put diversity in it. It doesn't make sense. But in 2014, SJWs were in a different headspace. I guess things are a little bit better now. I didn't realize how bad things were in 2014. Things have shifted. Things have shifted. Anyway, so the decentralized communities are really interesting to me. because it means that they're going to have to find ways to infiltrate them, and they have billions of dollars to do so, because unfortunately they have our tax dollars to brainwash us, which, it'd be sweet if the thing is, like, you see Trump rooting out some of this stuff, and then it's like people are on a little bit of a dopamine high, and I'm not, because I look at this and go, oh, things are so much worse than we imagine. Like, you're not going to be able to do this in 4 years. It's just the whole thing is the whole system is corrupt. You can't fix this. This is way, way beyond fixing. You would need to do things that most people would find unpalatable. So anyway, it seems like they're able to spend billions on these kind of narrative control by, Politico funding Politico for $30 million. And it seems like, if you have the money to do that, then it seems they're obviously collecting too many taxes, which, yes, obviously it's. Is it time for a tea party? Yeah, but that's another video. Anyway, like the guy said, you get what you tolerate, whether it's with games or movies or comics. You can just stop paying for these games, and people hear that, and they're not ready for that. But that's the only thing that changes things. If you just stop paying for the games, you stop paying for the movies. Though, if the government is subsidizing them with your tax dollars anyway, it's like, well, that okay, we need to stop that toot sweet. Um, but we need to stop it at a beyond executive order level. You need to stop it at a congressional level, like by law. But it would require a restructuring, a reevaluation of how people view the country and taxes. And I look at Congress, and, like, you realize Congress, both on the left and the right, have allowed this stuff for decades. So that's why I say it's like you're not going to vote your way out of it, because the Republicans are supposed to represent the right, but they saw this stuff, and they knew all this stuff was happening, and if they didn't know it was happening, then they're incompetent. It's like, well, that's where we are now. It's either incompetent or malicious, one or the other. It's like you can't vote them out every 2 years or every 4 years or every 6 years, whatever it is, because the system just keeps perpetuating itself. There's too many outside influences. These, State Street, Larry Fink type, and Soros and Schwab and whatnot. Anyway, our government is more corrupt than previously even black-pilled people imagined. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys on the next episode.